A lot of colorful activity going on in Louisiana. I've got an old friend, a fellow who a lot of you may remember back over the years, who's been one of the premier journalists in Louisiana on television as a writer. His name is John Camp. And John, you have traveled all over the country, all over the world. You've been with CNN, WRBZ here in Baton Rouge. You've had quite a colorful news career. Now you're back in Louisiana all the time, aren't you?
Yeah, I moved back in 2004, live up in St. Francisville on a golf course. And it is what they say, the good life, or at least I thought it was going to be, till I wrote a book, and then I found out there's a lot of work still left to do.
Well, we want to talk about that book, and John has written a great book called Odyssey of a Derelict Gunslinger about his very interesting and colorful experiences of covering both Louisiana issues and national issues. I want to talk about a few of those here in the time we have and kind of whet people's appetites for the book, John. One person you touch on a good bit is a very notorious character out of the Baton Rouge area named Seale, who quite frankly was a major drug runner. Most people don't realize his involvement in the Mexican mafia and all the conspiracy of the cartel, do they?
Well, the thing about Barry is there's been a lot of mythical stories told about him. Barry was pure and simple a drug smuggler who spent a good deal of his life running drugs, but mainly he was his own worst enemy because he used to like to brag about what he did. But nonetheless, he got caught running some pills into the country in Miami, cut a deal with the feds, and about the same time, he was contacted by the notorious Medellin cartel to haul one of the biggest loads of cocaine into the country ever brought in. And he saw it as an opportunity to become an informant. And the people in Miami, they rejected him. He finally hopped on an airplane, flew to Washington, to the Vice Presidential Drug Task Force and said, I can deliver to you the Medellin cartel. And they said, what's the Medellin cartel?
Oh, gee.
And that was the beginning of an investigation. It became one of the most significant in the history of the Drug Enforcement Administration. Barry did undercover work, and during the course of that, there was one mission involving some filming in which the CIA was involved. That led to the legend that he was a CIA operative and that he had a history of working for the CIA.
He just tried to cut a deal for himself is what he was doing.
Well, he cut a deal for himself. And
now, what's the Baton Rouge tie, though? To tell us about his Louisiana tie.
Well, there became a conflict. Barry went around, and unfortunately, and I hate to say this, I probably contributed to his assassination. Because when he became an informant in Miami, people in Baton Rouge were doing everything to come up with a case against him. So consequently, in the course of that investigation, he decided that they were playing unfair. And here he was the big informant in Baton Rouge. He was trying to defend himself. So he came to me and he says, I'm the most important informant the DEA has ever had. I'm in this important thing. I thought he was a BS artist. The upshot was that after we talked for a while, he said, I'll prove it to you. He says, come to Miami with me and I'll show you a meeting you can film secretly of me meeting with DEA agents and listen to the conversation. I didn't realize at the time, because I'd worked in Miami many years ago, I didn't realize it was two-party consent had now been passed on there. When I did this, it ended up violating the law, but fortunately nobody raised the issue. But I went down, he met with the DEA agents. I was convinced he was who he claimed to be. And I wrote a story, did a 1-hour documentary called Uncle Sam Wants You. And Uncle Sam Wants You was about targeting of people, and where you don't know exactly what the crime is, but you're going to go out and you're going to find a crime to stick on this. And it was very unpopular in Baton Rouge, particularly with law enforcement.
With the prosecutors, but as you and I know, that happens all the time. Well, Seale, tell us, and we don't have a lot of time in the short time we have left, about what led to his assassination. There was pleadings before federal judge Palazzolo that that if he was put in a halfway house, he was going to be murdered, and that's exactly what happened, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he had been, the charges, he was given a walk in Miami, and he cut a deal that he thought was going to be end of things here. Well, there was a little caveat in his plea bargain that said that he could be placed on probation. There could be restrictions. Well, the restriction turned out to be, according to Judge Palazzolo, to live in a halfway house. and it was a Salvation Army halfway house. Everybody from Miami, every law enforcement person, they said, we can't expose this guy because he's the chief witness against the cartel. And consequently, he went before Judge Palazzolo. Palazzolo said, no bodyguards, no nothing. You report every night. 2 weeks later, he was assassinated in the parking lot of the Salvation Army.
So Palazzolo's decision to put him in a halfway house led to the man being murdered by the cartel.
That is generally the consensus of everyone who's familiar with the case.
Well, there's a lot more stories in this book, and I urge you to get it. Odyssey of a Derelict Gunslinger. John, you can go to Amazon.com and put in John B. Camp or Odyssey of a Derelict Gunslinger. You can also, on my site, if you're watching this video on my website, you can go and see a link to John's site to order that book. Fascinating book, Jimmy Swaggart, so many things that you Louisiana folks will find of interest. I hope you'll take a look at it. John, take care. We'll talk some more.
Okay, thank you.